Boer prophet Siener van Rensburg. Visions as recorded by Anna Badenhorst. Part 7, 3 July 1918 till 20 September 1918. These are the visions Siener van Rensburg had and were recorded by his daughter Anna Badenhorst. The visions were interpreted by several persons, and these are mentioned with every vision. I do not do any interpretations myself. Let us begin with 3 July 1918. Vision number 351. Siener sees. I am in Europe on a very high mountain, and in front of me is a deep ravine and a cliff. When the cliff disappears, many English people flee from the ravine. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. We can very well see how the English are hiding from all the difficulties. When the time comes, we will see how they flee out of their hiding places. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. The Afrikaner is in Europe on a high mountain, perhaps the Alps. In front of me is a hiding place. When the protection disappears, the English flee from the hiding place. Interpretation by H.J. Wessels. This refers to the Maginot Line. 6 July 1918, vision number 352, Siener sees. In the Free State, there is a large pile of clean white corn and sorghum lying aside, but a bit dirty and being cleaned as well. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. In the Free State, the English have been nicely sifted from amongst the Afrikaners, but there are still other classes of supper that need to be sifted out. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. In the Free State, unity among the white people exists, and black people are pushed aside, separate. Attitudes are still doubtful. Attitudes become better or good, pure. 10 July 1918, vision number 353, Siener sees. At Vereniging, there is a yellow iron that draws a round yellow circle on the ground. Then a black pig with a long snout goes from Johannesburg to Vereniging. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. The English set up a lager near Vereniging, Sasolburg's petrol. A dirty Englishman. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. At Vereniging, there are English weapons. They fortify themselves. Then from Johannesburg, a black politician who talks a lot goes to Vereniging. Interpretation by Adriaan Snyman. In part 6 of his monographs, this vision is part of the final battle against the Boer nation. Niklaas said that the enemies of the Afrikaner will flee headlong to Vereniging when the bombs start falling. The yellow iron that makes a yellow circle represents the traitorous people who gather in Vereniging to deliver the final blow to the Afrikaner. However, Siener also mentions the black pig with the long snout that comes from Johannesburg. Black represents the black people. The pig is a symbol of capitalists or money makers. The long snout means that they will have a lot to say. Slogans. They will also go to Vereniging, possibly to encourage their own people. 20 July 1918, vision number 354, Siener seas. On the sea, round scales, like those used to weigh goods, move from west to north on the water. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. From England, ships go to America for protection. For example, the Queen Elizabeth and Queen Mary, and defeat the ships. The ships are used as collateral for money to enable England to wage war against Germany. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. It's literal. Ship's tonnage on the sea. 24 July 1918. Vision number 355, Siener seas. In Europe, there is a yellow stone in the west and a blue stone in the south. The blue stone is very rough and the yellow stone is fine. The stones grind against each other and disappear to the southwest. Then the stone grinds against each other again. The yellow stone comes towards the blue stone and turns again. The yellow stone is later like a wagon wheel when it falls over, and then the large wheels roll on their hub into the ground. Then the world in the southeast is like a harvested cornfield, and black cattle graze on the corn stalks towards the northeast. And when they reach the east, they are white speckled cattle. Then where the stone changed into a wheel, there is a large water hole, and the water is alive. And then cattle from the west side walk into the bank and become large on the east side. And there comes a train with blue wagons from the open place and moves south. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. In France, west of Germany, the war breaks out. The Germans are very strong, course. Towards the southwest, Bordeaux, the English will attack Germany again. It will go badly. They will roll on their hub. Harvested maize fields or cornfields indicates that they have been defeated. White speckled cattle are divided. They do not want to fight again. A large water hole means they get a lot of news from the difficulties. On the east side, it is well fortified and difficult to return for the black cattle. The German wagons head south from France. An interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. In Europe there is an English offensive in the west and a German offensive in the south. The German offensive in the south is very dangerous, and the English offensive is less dangerous. And there are battles taking place. The English attack the Germans again. The English offensive is scattered, and it is widely spread out. They suffer a lot. Russian offensive. They get stuck. In the southeast, the world is stripped bare, and black people move in the stripped land towards the northeast of Europe. When they arrive in the northeast, they are traitors. The turning point, a precarious position in the news. The media conducts a lively campaign. Then help arrives. Large resistance comes from the east. A train with German wagons comes out of the open space and moves towards the south. Interpretation by H.J. Dreyer. There are apparently many people who do not believe that a second front will be created in the west of Europe through an invasion. The invasion will take place. The late Siener saw two major and bitter battles in the west coming. And we know that only one, namely Dunkirk, has taken place so far, and that the second one is therefore still to come. And therefore the British Expeditionary Force must return again to meet the enemy for the second time. In addition, it is also clearly recorded in a vision where he sees how the two stones, a blue and a yellow, that's Germany and England, turn against each other. And when they move away, that is to say, after the first collision, there is silence. Then he sees the two stones grind against each other again, after the first move away. And with this second collision, he says the yellow stone comes to the blue. So we see and understand clearly that England will again set foot on the mainland of Europe to fight. The much talked about Second Front. If we now look at the situation in this way, then this grinding of the yellow stone against the blue should not be far off. See also the explanation on April 25, 1919 regarding the Second Front and Russia's role. This all relates to the Second World War. Interpretation by Adriaan Snyman. There is an organized group, possibly military, consisting of people from the Orient, potentially Indians or Japanese. They are met with resistance from Germany, represented by the blue stone. The yellow stone turning into a wheel symbolizes Islam, which supports this group. The confrontation ends in disaster for them as the wheel falls over. The other wheels turning on their hubs on the ground represent faith in God, triumphing. This may be a religious war or jihad, initiated mainly by the Muslims. After the confrontation, there is a harvest in the southeast that has been gathered. The maize cobs or corn cobs symbolizing negative or deceitful people who are trampled by black people or liberals in their peaceful march to the east. The black oxen are a threat. In the east, they change to speckled oxen, representing Russia. The fact that they become white speckled, with white symbolizing good, suggests a change in their intentions, and they no longer pose a threat. The support of the Muslims leads to a certain level of prosperity, with a thriving economy in the West. A fort is built in the East to protect this prosperity, and the good news spreads to the South. 27 July 1918, vision number 356, Siener sees. In German West, that's Namibia, brown wagons stand with the hitch facing southwest. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. Afrikaners to Cape Town. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. Afrikaners' vehicles are ready with the hitch facing southwest, ready to depart for South Africa. Interpretation by Adriaan Snyman. The white Afrikaners from German West, that's Namibia, are preparing to join the Afrikaners, the Boers, of Southern Africa. 3 August 1918. Vision number 357, Siener sees. There are many young trees in Europe that are alive, but they are dry and they are moving here to the east. When they disappear, there are large agave trees in the Union, but the trees are getting smaller and smaller until they disappear. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. In the east of England, children are sent to South Africa due to hunger and hardship. When the event of their arrival and reception and their tales are forgotten, the English in the Union continuously lose their power until they are powerless. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. In Europe, there are many war orphans. They are struggling to survive, and they come here, to Pretoria. When they disappear from sight, they are important English people, the royal family, here in South Africa. But the royal family loses their prestige and disappears. Interpretation by Adriaan Snyman. Europe sends many useless people here. Many of them come, but they do nothing for the country. Our once strong government gradually weakens until it ultimately has no power and then disappears. 4 August 1918, vision number 358, Siener sees. In the land where the black cattle moved, maize cobs appear, and later the maize cobs are piled up and become clean white maize. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. Dieppe, it's a coastal town in the south of France. English who no longer want to fight. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. It's linked to Vision 355. In the land where the traitors disappeared. Change is made and the land, Germany, becomes productive again. An interpretation by Adriaan Snyman. When a strong black consciousness becomes prominent in the country, the Afrikaners start to fight for their survival and become more united. The harvest is successful and the people have clear goals. A vote or a referendum will show how the people feel about the situation. There are clear indications of apartheid and or white racism re-emerging. 8 August 1918, vision number 358A, it's an addition, Siener sees. In Europe, a large fire ignites, first towards the northeast and then turns south. The wheel that turned in Europe turns in the Union. An interpretation by Boy Mussmann. Leningrad and Odessa, northeast of France. From there to French possessions in North Africa, south of France, now here. In the Union, the English's affairs start to get confused. The war comes to the Union. An interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. In Europe, there is much fighting. First in the northeast, then the offensive turns to France and Italy. The turning point that occurred in Europe also happens in the Union, politically. Interpretation by H.J. Wessels. This refers to the beginning of the war, September 1, 1939. Interpretation by Adriaan Snyman. A war will begin in Europe, with the conflict starting in the northeast and spreading to the south. Additionally, the Muslim movement has started to have an impact in South Africa. 11 August 1918, vision number 359, Siener sees. On the east side, a folded blanket emerges and unfolds. Then there is a pole, and at the top of the pole hangs the Vierkleur flag. On the west side, the earth is pitch black. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. A folded blanket is a concealed form of republic acquisition. It unfolds means the secret is revealed. Pitch black indicates big trouble. An interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. Something is happening under the blanket, in secret, in Pretoria, and it is made public. The Vierkleur flag is permanently planted and hanging. In Southwest Africa, the earth is destroyed. An interpretation by Adriaan Snyman. The truth about the Afrikaners' struggle for freedom, the folded blanket, will have to be kept tightly guarded for various political reasons at first. The pole that has already been planted means it is established and good. The Vierkleur flag is waving there, and the Afrikaner has gained his freedom, but not without a price. Because a war or a revolution will probably herald it, or immediately follow it. Another later reinterpretation by Adriaan Snyman. The Boer leaders will try to keep their actions from the past hidden, but they will eventually be revealed, mostly with the help of Indians in the Truth Commission. The pole with the Vierkleur flag represents the loyal Afrikaners. Once the struggle is over, they will not only stand more firmly, but also achieve the freedom they have been seeking for a long time. However, during this time, there will still be wars being fought in different parts of the world. The world is pitch black. 19 August 1918, vision number 360, Siener sees. On the western side, a stone falls over, and then it is the front part of a wagon that fell over. The top wheel turns around a small cart. In the southwest, in the Cape, an old cart stands with the wheel on the north side, which is tangled by a wire. And then the wire tips the old cart and it falls to the north. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. The defense plan of German West, Namibia, collapses. Similarly, the parliamentary decision has no value after the war in the north. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. In Southwest Africa, Namibia, there is an offensive. When the offensive goes wrong, it is the top management of an organization that has been defeated, and the leader does not know where to go. In the Cape, there is an old party. On the north side, the party is tied, and it causes the organization to fall in favor of the north. 21 August 1918, vision number 361, Siener sees. In the west side of the Union, there is a pit with dry agave logs lying over it. Then a cart wheel in the northwest of Europe turns around. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. The English home front, the dry agave logs. In the west of the Union, keep watch around the camp. In the northwest of Europe, an offensive is in disarray. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. In Southwest Africa, Namibia, there is a perilous situation. The Old English cover up the situation. There is a policy change in England. 23 August 1918, vision number 362, Siener sees. In Europe, a block is split in two by a sharp knife. Then a scythe comes and cuts off the bottom piece, which becomes a dry agave tree. It continues to cut all around until it has completely cut it off. On the other side, the scythe has cut a little wide, and the remaining piece becomes a cloth that wraps around the agave stump. The agave stump turns around. A large group of blue cattle goes towards the south, and to the right is a clay wall. In Pretoria, a fierce fire burns behind a lane, but it eventually fades away. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. There is a split in England. There is a lot of division. The English are facing more and more difficulties against the government. A split follows, and the government can eventually see no way to prevent or avoid the difficulties. A large group of Germans go south of France, hidden danger in secret, and disappears. A secret organization that takes on great difficulties and dies. An interpretation by H.J. Wessels. The first part refers to Poland. The blue cattle heading south refers to Holland and Belgium. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. In Europe, there is a political alliance. A sharp difference of opinion causes a split. Then an investigation comes, exposing the foundations of one block. Then it is a worthless Englishman. Thorough investigation until everything is exposed. Those who remain are powerless and support the English. Many Germans go to the south. To the right from here, the Berlin Wall. Resistance against Jan Smuts's war effort. In secret, the Ossewaar Brandwacht, and disappear on their own. An interpretation by H.J. Dreyer. An acquaintance of the late Siener stated that Siener told him that Italy will join Germany in this war, and then switch sides to join the Allies, just as it did in 1914. Another acquaintance disputes this, as Siener never mentioned it to him. Regardless of what Siener said or didn't say about this matter, his notes are available to consult in case of uncertainty, and therefore I will discuss any visions that may be relevant to the matter so that interested parties can get an idea of what to expect in regards to that situation. The most significant part of this vision is the transformation of the split part of the block into a dry agave stump. The agave stump is something British, a representative, ally, or something of that sort. Here in this country, he sees the Governor-General in this form. This means that one part of the bloc becomes pro-British, or an ally of Britain. It was not previously British, but undergoes a change. The question now is, who or what does this bloc symbolize now? What anti-British alliance exists in Europe that can be split and one part attach itself to Britain? It seems to be only the Axis bloc, and furthermore, that the British knife is always held sharp to divide as much as possible. A bloc in Europe, a sharp knife splits it in two and one part becomes British. See also the explanation on February 15, 1920 and August 15, 1923. Later videos to come. 27 August 1918. Vision number 363, Siener sees. A book opens. The first page is black. On the second page, people are sitting. On the third page becomes large and long. And on the back there is writing. And then a saber comes out. Saber is a type of sword. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. We are thinking about the past, the black past, make peace. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. Negotiations begin. No progress is made. People participate. Long drawn-out squabbling afterwards. Betrayal. The seed of anarchy, revolution, emerges. Interpretation by Adriaan Snyman. This vision refers to the negotiations that took place in South Africa during the transition from apartheid to democracy, known as the CODESA negotiations. The vision speaks of blacks on one side and other people on the other side, engaged in negotiations about human rights. The third page becomes large and long. However, the negotiations will not be conducted in all honesty, as indicated by the writing on the back. This ultimately leads to something other than the expected peace. A saber comes out. The melted lead. This vision is a clear reference to CODESA, because it is about two groups of people, blacks and others, who are negotiating. But these negotiations will be very long and drawn out. The third page becomes big and long. It will definitely not be done in all honesty. There is a scheming afterwards, possibly by more than one of the parties involved, because there is writing on the back. However, at the end of the negotiations will bring anything but the expected peace. A sword comes out the saber. It is very interesting that this vision specifically refers to a saber, type of sword. Certainly the most famous Russian weapon from the time when communism took hold. And therefore, one must assume that the confrontation being referred to will be communist-inspired. The nature and scope of the confrontation is not mentioned in this vision, but in another vision that Siener had. 1 September 1918, vision number 365, Siener sees. In Europe, the sickle becomes a saw and moves towards the northeast, followed by wagons and red oxen. In Cape Colony, there is a bag and bits of iron come out of it, followed by a cable. I take hold of the cable. The interpretation by Boy Mussmann. The operations of the axis, the three sickles becoming one, intensify and expand greatly. Wagons head to Russia, and the English also follow behind them. The English defense crumbles near us, and then our thing comes. The interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. In Europe, communism grows in the northeasterly direction. Then follows war machinery with communist soldiers. In the Cape Colony, there is a bag, which is closed. Then weapons come out. In Europe, there is a turnaround, the end of the war. 3 September 1918, vision number 366, Siener sees. In Europe, the wheel turns. Then it becomes square and disappears. There are white bones lying there. The interpretation by Boy Mussmann. At Dieppe, the wheel became square. It did not want to roll, and it cost a lot of blood. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. There is a turn in the war. It stops moving at the end of the war. The aftermath of the war remains. 11 September 1918, vision number 367, Siener sees. Far in the north, a person on a dapple grey horse comes from the south and then disappears. Then English wagons go towards Johannesburg. In the Free State, a large paper resembling a newspaper catches fire where it touches the ground. In the southwest, horses approach each other. These horses are white. In the north, there is wheat that is tall and ripe, but very thin. Supper. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. News comes from America, the dapple grey horse. Changed reports coming south. Then the English start moving towards Johannesburg. Then a proclamation goes through the Free State, and it sets fire to the world. News of the North Pole battles. Then there are people in Cape Town who want peace. They come together with peace proposals. Now the supper are done with. An interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. In the north, very far, someone comes, a traitor or murderer, to the south, near us. He disappears. Then English war equipment moves to Johannesburg. Then there is a lot of news and intimidation in the Free State, like in a newspaper. Everywhere it touches, there is revolution. Then movements come closer together in the southwest. They are peace movements. Then there are also supper in the north. The supper present themselves well, but there are not many of them. The wheat represents the supper. Interpretation by H.J. Dreyer. With the departure of the man on the dapple grey horse, which is the same as the speckled cattle, there is a general concentration of English units in Johannesburg and activities in the Free State in another place. In another place, Siener refers to them by their nickname, namely pigs, where they also run to Johannesburg when the earth here turns black. In a letter he clarifies it, the departure of the speckled cattle in Europe and the wheat on the floor here, or the earth turning black. The earth turns black as the cattle depart, is a sign that the time is coming closer. The wheat on the floor, according to his own explanation, refers to supper returning to the National Party. This refers to the cabinet crisis of September 4, 1939, when the Afrikaners broke away with General Smuts and returned to the National Party. Here we have two separate signs, both of which indicate the beginning. The first, namely the wheat on the floor, 4 September 1939, was the beginning stage of the war, with the second, namely the departure of the cattle or the earth turning black, the beginning of the end stage. It's not just in South Africa where the departure of the speckled cattle brings about a revolution. 12 September 1918, vision number 368, Siener sees. A small white flag comes out from a group of cattle. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. A small group makes peace. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. A group of people surrender. 15 September 1918, vision number 369. I walk towards the north side, and the path I'm walking on eventually disappears under the water. The water rises up. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. We observe events in the north. The news completely covers the predictions of Siener. Siener's predictions are drowned out by the water. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. The news covers up Siener's predictions completely, causing them to disappear under the water. Later, the Afrikaners go to the north, and the path they follow is overwhelmed by propaganda and the media. Intimidation increases quickly. 20 September 1918. Vision number 370. Siener sees. In Europe, a man holds a white cloth up with both hands. Then a straight, white, even road opens to the southwest. Then the road makes a turn, and a blue stone breaks off and rolls to the southeast. Springboks run in front of the stone. Then a large blue stone appears in Europe. It first rolls to the west, then turns and rolls to the north. Interpretation by Boy Mussmann. Surrender of Greece makes the campaign possible to Crete. From the difficulty that arises, the German defense emerges and moves towards Johannesburg. The English flee from the offensive of Germany. The Germans first fight in France, Greece, and then America. Interpretation by Nellie van Zyl. A man in Europe offers peace with both hands. Then peace without obstacles comes to the southwest. A problem arises, and there is a German offensive that moves to the southeast. South African troops flee from the offensive. In Europe, a major German offensive begins, first moving west and then turning around and going north. Interpretation by H.J. Dreyer. The relationship between Germany and Russia. A few years after the previous World War, a German artilleryman holds a certain Afrikaner in Schweizer that after the cessation of Krupp's arms factory, according to the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, the best German experts were working in Russian arms factories, and that they had postponed the continuation of the war. As a result, a visit was made to the late Siener van Rensburg, and he was asked if he might see something that could result in cooperation between Germany and Russia. He then shared the following vision with the visitors. I see teams of oxen coming from the far north of Europe to the south, each with 2 blue lead oxen. It was immediately inferred from this that the 2 aforementioned countries would eventually act together, and that German officers, the blue lead oxen, would lead the rough, illiterate, and undisciplined Russian troops. And then the Friendship Treaty was signed on 23 August 1939 between Germany and Russia. There was nothing left to doubt. Today the vision is literally and accurately fulfilled, not as it intended, but exactly as Siener saw it. From the northern ice sea to the Black Sea in the south, the Germans are engaged in a struggle with the Russians. They take the initiative and military leadership, the blue lead oxen, against the Russian troops and not over them. And Romanians, Hungarians, Slovaks, Finns, Dutch, French, Spaniards, Italians, etc., Teams of oxen follow. Today, the entire civilized world watches with fear and anticipation the outcome of the struggle against the terrible Bolshevism. Everyone shudders at the mere thought of a victory on that side. In this connection, I would like to share what Siener Nicolaas saw further in that area. Then a large blue stone comes out in Europe. It first rolls to the west, turns and rolls to the east, and then turns northward. It cannot be inferred from this who the winner will be. However, pay attention to what the stone has accomplished in its previous movements. In the west, Holland, Belgium, and France are flattened. From there to the east, and it flattens the Balkan countries. It then turns northwards and is currently engaged in its third and final roll. If we consider these three rolls as one movement, as it is also written in reality, and pay attention to the results to date, it is only natural to assume that communism will disappear. Interpretation by H.J. Wessels. East refers to Russia. This concludes this session of the Visions. If you have questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section and I will attempt to answer where possible. Please do subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so that you can be informed when the next video is uploaded. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.